I know it is daunting and it seems scary to go and reach out, but you will be well surprised on the response that you get and how positive it is if you just step out on that limb and are a little bit uncomfortable.
Sort of like how I stepped out on a limb to ask you to come to the show, and you didn't answer. But I guess, but
you see how
we're
it
doing this though.
came back full circle, though.
It's what I'm saying. It's a win-win, right? You stepped out on a limb, I stepped out on a limb, and look what happens, right? It's a win-win, perfect combination.
No Free Lunch is presented by T. Price. The information provided on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified financial and or legal professionals before making any legal or financial decisions or investments. I'm Ndamukong Suh, and welcome to No Free Lunch, where we talk to experts and athletes about how the most successful people in sports manage their money and grow their wealth. All right, Jabari, excited to have you as a regular contributor. He's been a senior writer for Forbes for many years, editorial lead for Forbes Black, and also on CNBC, as well as San Antonio Express News, where he covered, of course, the San Antonio Spurs. Jabari, welcome to the show.
Well, I'm excited to be here, man. Thank you, Ndamukong. And listen, thank you finally for answering my call, right? You were supposed to come do my show, and all of a sudden now I'm on your show, and we're talking about Big Face and diving into the conversation with Jimmy Butler, man. So I'm very, very happy to be here. Thank you for choosing me.
No question. Well, let's jump into it. Today, we're going to be talking about Jimmy Butler and a business that he started called Big Face Coffee. And Jimmy, you were able to sit down with, especially recently with him, with the transition over to the Golden State Warriors, leaving Miami. But getting back to this in his Big Face Coffee, what is it with that Big Face Coffee, and why throughout that interview and that conversation you had with Jimmy, was he so focused on this particular brand and wanting to build this, especially, and how did this just come together as a concept for him?
I mean, listen, you have to go all the way back to 2001, 2020, in a way, when the NBA went down to Orlando to save their season, in the NBA, the bubble. And, Jimmy has something to his advantage, right? He has it goes back to the old supply demand, Ndamukong, right? He had the coffee. And then if you're an NBA player, you was in the NFL, right? You don't want the hotel coffee, right? You want that premium coffee, that good stuff. And, here you go. Jimmy Butler has always been a coffee aficionado in his own way. Had the beans, had his espresso machine. That was one of the items that he could not live without in the NBA bubble. And so he takes that down into Orlando inside of that bubble, and bam, it becomes a hit because guys want a cup of coffee. They want that good coffee. And because supply demand, he had it on his side. He was able to charge $20 a cup. Big faces only, right? And so he develops the theme Big Faces Only because he was only taking those big face dollar bills, right? Not a dollar bill, those big face $20 bills. If you don't got a 20, give me the 50. Only those big faces. So damn, you have the concept, the idea, you have your NBA brethren who obviously are supporting this, right? I mean, and then you're on the biggest stage of your entire career in the NBA. What better way to start a business than when you're with the NBA? You have the platform all to yourself. Reporters, everybody wants to talk to you. So that's free publicity. I remember talking to the owner of the New York Islanders. He said, the best thing about owning a sports team? You never have to pay for marketing. We get the front or the back page of the newspaper every single time, right? And it's very true. And so here you go, Jimmy Butler has that platform with the bubble and bag. You started to see the stories come out. I had a chance to not only talk to him, at the NASDAQ, but, before, while he was in the middle of doing all of this. And you just learn a lot of key things. First, obviously, again, we talk about supply and demand, right? But how to turn a passion into an idea, right? And then have the business landscape lay it out for you. And so Jimmy obviously went and not only started that coffee brand within the bubble, but he went around the world studying what coffee beans were the best, talking to people, right? Understanding that coffee is that very thing that brings people together. Bam, I have an idea. Wouldn't people want to come hang out with me, Jimmy Butler, and also drink coffee? Here you have that brick and mortar store that he just built in Miami last year in 2024. So it all kind of came together for him, and it came together in that bubble, but he was able to take something, that small idea, and take something like a cup of coffee, right? Something that we can't live with. I drink coffee all the time. Well, I switched to matcha, and we'll get into that a little later on. But you could take that thing, that beverage that brings everyone together, and all of a sudden have this big pit business plan. And the barrier to entry is not to start a coffee brand is not as hard as it used to. And hence he has that brick and mortar store. So, I mean, to see where he's come at in 2020 in that bubble to 2025 right now, has that brick and mortar store, opening more stores, just struck a brand deal, right, with a foreign soccer team. And so to see what he's doing and to see how that brand has grown so much and the time, right, the time that he's devoted to talking about it, to marketing it and talking to journalists like myself about it, it just goes, it's remarkable, man. It's remarkable to see how that brand is continuing to grow.
So I want to come back to some of those partnerships a little bit later, as you mentioned, especially with the foreign teams and be going international, especially with him having ties to Miami and that being an international hub on the East Coast and whatnot. But specifically, obviously, coffee and basketball are not synonymous with each other. But athletes drink coffee. I drink coffee myself. I'm an aficionado just from the simple fact I'm from the Pacific Northwest, where you got Starbucks, you got Dutch Bros, you got all these amazing coffee companies that have been started back here in the Pacific Northwest. And I was fortunate enough as a young lad doing internships and externships. And I had a day where I went up to Starbucks and sat down with Howard Schultz and his team to be able to understand like how they were building out their stores back in the early 2000s, just understanding like, hey, like all these different concepts that you're doing. Starbucks is struggling right now. They've got a lot of competition. They've got a lot of other cool brands that have popped up and they're trying to stay relevant from their perspective. With a new company like Big Face coming in, why do you think Jimmy had the reasoning and want to start the company?
Well, again, it gets back to your passion, right? I mean, let's look at your career, for example, right? You loved football and it turns into this big passion. And obviously you go on and make a, terrific career, win some Super Bowls, played in my native city in Philadelphia, although I wasn't an Eagles fan, but still I'll let you slide for that one. But it gets back to the passion, right? They'll want to. You out there, you heard that old saying, like if you get up every single day and you go to work and it's something that you don't like doing and like, it's what are you doing? Right. It's not really a job. It's a job at that point. But if you get up every single day and you love what you do, it's not a job. It becomes just this hobby that you're starting to make money off of. And Jimmy, again, loves talking to people. He is a really, really interesting person, as a whole, but he's just, you sit down and talk to him, man, you can go for hours and hours and hours because he has so many interesting ideas, so many interesting perspectives. Mike Tyson was like that. You talk to older journalists and they always tell you how Mike Tyson was a historian. If you sit down with him, no cameras on, this man it's just a fascinating conversation. What better way to do that than a cup of coffee? Or for some businesses, wine, right? Wine and coffee seems to be the two things, especially in the NBA, that seems to drive players, right? They obviously drink coffee. They're up all the time. Jimmy is a big coffee drinker and he also loves wine, right? I was just talking to CG McCollum about his wine business. And so I think the
and the passion,
it just came together, right? It just came together. And so it gets also back to the time commitment, man, right? It's one thing to have an idea. It's one thing to take it and take that passion and go for it, right? But when you start to put it into business, you have to make the time. When I get pitched from athletes or companies and, they tell me about their product and I say, okay, well, look, let's go and talk for an hour about the business. Oh, all I got is 10 minutes. Yeah. What can you do with 10 minutes? Jimmy makes the time. He'll make the time on a Zoom call. He'll come to New York when he's playing to sit down with me at the NASDAQ. And he makes the time to know, to make the time to understand, right? He wants you to know about his passion. He wants you to know about the history of Big Face, hoping that you'll then take that and it'll customer acquisition cost is basically what it is. Undercover customer acquisition cost, hoping that you will come over to Big Face. And he gave me some of that coffee. It's very good coffee.
So let's talk about that a little bit more, because you said it started in his hotel room, obviously during the bubble and that transition with the NBA saving the season and going on from there. But Jimmy, him starting this company in that hotel room, he could have stopped there. You're saying he's advanced it and became brick and mortars, created partnerships across the world. Like, what has it taken for him to be able to get that done? And how much money is he invested in that company? And what type of partnerships, and more so, what type of team has he built around himself? Because he is still an active basketball player.
He is. And so you're talking several millions of dollars, right? I cannot picture Jimmy investing more than 10 because the barrier of entry is so low to start a coffee company. And so strategically, obviously, once you have the brand, you obviously have to go trademark it. That's something that he did very early on because he knew that this was going to take this and, put it into a business play. And then he teamed up with Shopify, which was very interesting because at that point, Shopify had that business model where they weren't really charging their top entrepreneurs like NBA players. They just wanted the brand recognition. It was a trade-off. And so you get to Shopify to kind of understand the dynamics, the e-commerce side, right? Wholesale, distribution, and all of that, which leads to the brick and mortar store. Now, from right now, I believe he has about 8 to 10 employees. And so here's where it starts to get tricky at, right? Now, so you have all the business is all, and you invested your several million dollars. Now it appears your operational cost is going to go up. And so now I'm looking to see, okay, Jimmy, it was phenomenal. You got it off the ground. The brand is built. You're Jimmy Butler. So wherever you go, you got the NBA for your platform. You can have big face. What happens when things start to get more expensive? What happens when raw materials, which you see right now going up, tariffs? What happens when all those things start? All of that, right? What happens? Now you got insurance. Now you have you got the brick and mortar, so you have insurance in the store. You got health insurance now because you got employees. If you're not treating those employees right, are they going to start a union? You're going to run into Starbucks problems, right? You said Starbucks was struggling early on, and I think the reason why is because they lost their personalization. You went to go to Starbucks, you had that personalization. Now it almost appears you go to Starbucks, they trying to get you in and out of the store. It's like, wait a minute, I could have went to Dunkin' Donuts for that, right? I mean, I don't want to be in and out of the store. I want the experience. But I like, if Jimmy was to have to go and say, hey, who do I study in the coffee space? You mentioned it earlier, and me and you talked about this when you were selling me on the show. Dutch Brothers, man. I think the way Dutch Brothers did it, localized, right up in the Northwest, and now it's expanded down to Texas. Their story is phenomenal if you want to find out how to take a small coffee brand and growing into something that is going further and further. I hope it comes back east. I hope it gets to this point because I love Dutch Brothers and I love that story and the way that they started. It was pure hustle, pure grind, similar to the way Jimmy Butler did in that hotel room.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. And you touched on two things that I really want to go a little deeper into and dive into. So you talked about operational success and operations of taking care of your employees and building this culture and this atmosphere. But then you also, on the flip side, you're talking about brick and mortar, where I relate that to directly of real estate, and is two things. How does that operational success come to fruition? One, not only to start it, build that culture and have success to where you're now profitable or at minimum breaking even to profitable. And then also looking at brick and mortar, what's that vertical integration? Is Jimmy owning that land? Is he also owning those buildings and those different things? You mentioned his house being a part of that as well. Yeah. And what does that look like? Is he now turning his house into a museum of some sort to where now it is an ultimate full circle experience also, and selling coffee, and now it's a real estate play for himself?
Yeah, I think it's still so early for him. Right now, the Miami location where his first brick and mortar store, that's lease, right? And so the land is not there. And it might be good because he's going to go through some trials and tribulations, Ndamukong, as you know, being in a retail space is hard. I mean, it's a hard business.
Let alone retail space.
Hospitality, it's hard, man. And so I think it's still early from him. What I'm learning from him is that he's learning himself, right? You talk about the mistakes and things like that. One of the things that he did that he learned early on was that he spent $65,000, over $65,000, trying to go to get premium El Salvador beans, understanding that the cost effectiveness, that was not a good cost move, right? Because you're spending that much on beans.
Jamaica, right down the road from Miami.
Can you make it back when you charge people? And I think he found out the hard way that that's not, maybe something that he would go down that road and do. He's not doing it again in a Cup of Excellence auction, for premium coffee beans. So I think that's one thing that he's continuing to learn. And as he said himself, he's learning how to shut the hell up and listen to other people around him, staffing those things, staffing great voices, diverse voices around him to understand where it makes the best sense. Partnerships are going to be very key for him. And then you mentioned talking about the partnership that he had with Paris Saint-Germain. And I think that that's going to be great because if you know Jimmy, he is a very big international thinker. You play in the NBA, you have to think international. And I think this is where he's looking. He loves to be over in Paris all the time. This is where he's looking to grow his brand from an international standpoint, because again, barrier of entry for coffee is not that hard. Brick and mortar stores, I think he goes and you start to see those pop up small, right? Those pop up brick and mortar stores, right? I know he has a place out in California, so maybe you do something down there near the San Diego area, and then maybe another one somewhere in Florida, or maybe in one of his old stomping grounds, maybe in Chicago or Philadelphia, just to kind of understand what that's going to entail. Because again, now you're going to have people on the ground. You're going to have people running those stores. Can you trust them, right? A great movie I love on Netflix called The Founder, how the McDonald's story came in. That was a real estate play, right? Do you want to do the real estate? Do you want to do the leases? And also, how else are you envisioning these coffee spots, right? Can you be innovative with them and turn them into a coffee shop experience? But what does that look like? Does it look like a basketball court in there as well? Does it look like a soccer, a net with a small field that people can play around? What does that look like? And so I think, again, he's at the very, very beginning of building this brand. I really do believe it's a long-term play for him based off of just the strategic things that he's doing now as a player, right? Jimmy Butler's not no fool. But again, over the next 3 to 5 years, I know I'll be monitoring to see how it's growing and where it had to maybe pivot a little bit, similar to the way he pivoted about outsourcing beans. So it's still early in his journey, man. I mean, listen, he started that 2020, it's 2025 right now, only a 5-year company. One can consider that still a startup. So you're going to go through startup phases and what that looks. But again, the easy thing is that it's not hard. Coffee is going to continue to grow, right? You look at the last 5 years, right? It's $100 billion, estimated to be over $100 billion, by the time the next 5 years, by the end of this decade. So it's going to continue to grow. It's just a matter of where you can get in and where he can understand what revenue looks like, what cost looks like, what operational cost looks like, labor costs. That's a big thing. And then the biggest cost of it all, the raw materials, the actual coffee, and looking at it. There's a lot of geopolitical things at hand. So that can be very expensive. So I'm going to be looking at the next 3 to 5 years to see how he grows, particularly under, a brand new set of rules with a new administration. Now, Ndamukong, listen, the operational costs, to get into the coffee sector is not that big, but let me flip this back on you for a minute, because what opportunities have you sensed where the operation, the barrier to entry is not that bad compared to some other industries, right? It takes a lot to go and start a mining company, right? The barrier to entry is very, very high. But have you sensed, as you look for opportunities now and you think about the ones that you've had, what do you see, those barrier to entries? What sectors specifically work for you?
I think there's a handful of opportunities that have come across my table, but I think just playing off of the big face copy and hospitality, I've had a lot of opportunities in that particular space. And I know it's been stated throughout the decades that athletes should stay away from hospitality, but I've been very fortunate to have a lot of success in that area. I've only really had one bad partner in situation that's happened to me where I've had to take over 2 companies and really try and right that ship. And what I've soon learned, especially in this last 18 to 24 months of having to take over these 2 companies and turn them around and find ways, is it comes to the operational side of things. And really, as we've talked about earlier on in this conversation, the employees, the structure, the understanding of the culture and how to empower people is very, very key into having success, and also having people have expertise. So I was fortunate enough to find a good friend over the last year and a half or so, a guy named Greg Majewski, who was started originally at Jimmy John's. If I'm not mistaken, he took Jimmy John's from 3 stores to 300 stores and the franchising model and these different particular pieces. And I was like, you're an amazing operator, and I need to learn from you how I need to do those operations within these 2 companies to right this ship so they avoided bankruptcy. And what it ended up evolving to was saying, hey, man, let's become partners, and finding quality partners who have that expertise and teaching me how that all ultimately works. And then I was fortunate enough, he just ended up buying these companies and being able to take them over. And now they're in a bigger group that have a lot of opportunity for success. And they've got a big North Star and a big opportunity to be that much more successful.
Well, what challenges though? You talk about operation and the challenge that comes with it, right? What did you learn that you may not have known going in, or something that you had to learn the hard way that he taught you? Hey, listen, this is the right way to do it.
It's the people. I think the people are very, very key. Your employees, how they're treated, how you treat them, vice versa, the communication, the openness to be able to have tough conversations and be able to present those tough conversations in the right form or fashion so they're received and you're not talking down to them, especially because you're typically sitting, at least for myself in a position of power and not talking down to them, empowering them to be able to say, hey, you can make decisions, but also I'm here to support you. If I don't know, if we can't have these open discussions, we can't turn around and correct things or make them easier or better for us all to be able to have that sort of success. And one thing I love people to understand that when you're doing business with me, if I win, you win. If you win, I win. So let's work together versus seeing as adversary from that standpoint.
Is it hard picking people? Like, they tell you all the time, first, the power of thank you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you telling your employees thank you, you'll be surprised the amount of efficiency that you get from them, the amount of dedication that you get from them. It's just the power of thank you. But is it tough picking people when you're trying to build an operation, build a culture?
Yeah, I think it's definitely tough picking people. And also it's like, to your point of saying thank you, but also not just saying thank you emptyless, being able to say thank you and actually have meaning behind it, giving them example of why you're saying thank you to them. Because I think people have caught on to saying, hey, they're just giving me praise so I keep doing well, or I keep doing exactly what they're saying. No, I'm saying I'm going to give you praise because you were forward thinking, you were proactive, you were doing something that, hey, I brought this to your attention, or you went ahead and did this already and said, hey, I feel a part of this. You've empowered me to be able to make decisions. And I appreciate you doing that and taking that and owning the company. No different as you were an owner yourself, even though you may not be.
Yeah. Now, do you have a question to ask them? I remember Doc Rivers, the NBA coach, he would always ask guys, what's the first thing you did in the morning, right? The trick is that if they made up their bed, that would show that they know how to, they make a mess, they clean it up, right? It would kind of show responsibility, accountability, right? Is there a question that you like to ask someone from an employee standpoint to understand, hey, they're going to fit into this culture because they answered it the right way?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's a specific thing that I would ask them. I think it's understanding what their strong suits are and what their weaknesses, and do they actually even know that themselves? And that's something that I've really looked at from an Enneagram perspective, which is kind of like a personality test of how you're wired and how you function. And I think that's important to building a culture, because the best businesses, the best organizations, there are people that are very, very strong in their particular space, but they're also open to be able to work with other people for them to have that same support, because they're strong in this area and they can rely on this other person, vice versa, rely on you for their strengths. I have a question of what you believe success is for him. And you mentioned $100 billion business in coffee, or in this coffee sector, for lack of better words, in 2020. And then obviously now being 2025, 5 years later, it's looking to be estimated about 138 billion coffee sector. Where do you see Jimmy's success, and what are some of the takeaways that you've had with that conversation of why he's going to be able to reach that success?
Well, the takeaway is that I just believe it. Again, I get a feel for when athletes are dedicated to something, and you get a feel for when they're not. A great businessman who I've studied, is Junior Bridgman. God bless his life and what he was able to accomplish. And when you talk to a guy like that and you talk to how he kind of looked at business, you get a feel for who's serious about it and who's not. I think Jimmy's serious about it. What success looks like to him, listen, put a gun in my head. I would say that if he had a couple of brick and mortar stores, a couple in the US, maybe a few international, and continues to build the e-commerce line along with the merchandise, I think that would be a good success for him. I mean, I can't envision this turning into a Starbucks franchise. I don't think it'll be that big, but I think if you start to see Jimmy pop up in some of your grocery stores, pop up in just different, locales across the country, I think that's successful for him. You're not going to beat Starbucks. You're not going to beat Dunkin' Donuts. They may acquire you, right? But you're not going to beat them, right? Their market share is too big, and Jimmy Butler would need a whole bunch of investors. The big thing about this is that he has no investors right now. He's doing all of this with his own money, right? He is the sole owner of this particular entity. And I think that's going to be key as well. How does that go forward? Because you're going to need some investors coming on. You're going to need some outside capital if you expand to get that to that far. I know Jimmy's made a lot of money in his NBA career, but I doubt he wants to spend all of it trying to grow a coffee brand and competing against, the bigger players. And so what does that look like from an investment standpoint? A lot to be seen over the next 3 to 5 years. But again, he's gotten it off the ground from a brand awareness standpoint, brand exposure, because we're talking about it right now.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. I'm excited to see where this goes, and we'll see how
Wait,
Jimmy.
before you say that, man, I have a question for you because
Yeah.
this is very interesting because we talk about time commitment. You have
Uh-huh.
your own businesses, right?
Yep.
What does it take for someone like yourself, someone maybe in the prime of their careers, to really devote the time to grow their outside businesses, particularly when you have the schedule that you have? And NFL players, they have brutal schedules. I mean, you have to keep your bodies in shape. You got training camps, OTAs, all of that, right? But what does it take for you to go the extra mile to devote the time to grow the businesses? Because again, Jimmy does it. He might be one of the key guys that do it, but a lot of guys, especially in this new era of social media, they don't think that they need to devote the time that it takes to really build it. So how did you do it?
Man, I would say, one, I love the question. Two, the time and dedication, it all comes down to organization and determination to be able to do that. Because yes, we have the demanding schedule of the NFL for my example, and even the NBA from their travel schedule and things of that nature. But I know, especially after year 3 and 4 of being in the league, what I need to do to be able to be successful on the football field. And really, ultimately, what I bet you is allowing Jimmy to have even more success in his basketball career, because he goes in and dives in on that sport, on his sports and endeavors, and says, hey, I'm going to work out in this particular point in time, and I'm going to schedule that first and foremost. And then I'll move on to clear my mind from sports and come back even sharper, because then I transition and go and focus on big face copy. I got to sit in board meetings. I got to sit in meetings about operations. I got to sit in business meetings about finance and all these different things that have his brain moving and staying sharp. And then he comes back to basketball, which is like a home away from home, and then dives back into that. And I use that for myself to be able to get away from football, to be able to be refreshed and recharge. And then I come back even better and stronger in the sports world to be able to have that success. And I love that towards the end of my career, and especially the last 5 or 6 years, because I was diving into sports early in the morning, got my workouts in, got my meetings done, got practice done, had the rest of the day, afternoon, to be able to work on some business stuff while I'm doing treatment and some other particular pieces. And my mind was so fresh, ready to go back to football on Sundays or Mondays to go knock some quarterbacks down.
Because you were diversifying your mind as far as taking care of your business, take your mind off of football. So once you got back to football, it was like the focus was right there.
Exactly.
If you would have told all those other guys that, man, we could have saved all of. There's a whole bunch of dudes I see start all of these great businesses, and I'm like, man, this seems like a great idea. But I know you're not ready to put the time in. You're not ready to put the time in to make it grow.
It's not easy. And especially as a young guy or gal in sports, they have a lot of interest and excitement to enjoy life and be able to go have fun when you don't have OTAs, and throughout the summer and all these different off periods, rather than going and doing an internship, an externship, or even just saying, hey, I'm curious to learn about this. Let me just spend a couple hours a day on that and immerse myself into something that I may want to transition to after I'm done playing sports.
And I think, and you hit it right on the money too. You know, the one thing that, that Junior Bridgman did during his playing days is that every single city that he went to, he met with top CEOs. And it was like a cheat code in a way, because you know as well as I do, they hate when journalists call. They don't like that, right? But they love it when y'all call, right? An athlete calls, they will cancel everything. Look, we got a soccer game with the baby. No, I'll be there later. Ndamukong Suh wants to meet me, right? And they're going to make the time for athletes. And it's like, man, you guys get a free education from the very top of the food chain when it comes to the CEOs. And Junior Bridgman did that. And that's why I mention his name so much, because I don't think a lot of young guys do it. And I was surprised. He even said that. I said, wait a minute. You guys play in front of thousands and thousands of people. It's a different level of playing in front of thousands of people and then going up to a CEO and asking, hey, can you teach me? It's a whole different set of pride and all of that. And I just think, man, if more guys do it, you will see so many success stories similar to, Big Face Coffee and what Jimmy did. Even though he took his idea and was able to maximize it, he still was able to tap outside help so he can help grow this brand. And I feel like, man, if young guys did that more, set and met with CEOs in every last city that he go to. Don't go to the club. Don't go to the best restaurant. Go to a CEO's office and spend a few hours and do it. I think you'll see so many success stories from ex-athletes as they, emerge and leave the game behind.
Junior Bridgman was a mentor of mine. And when I found out that news that he passed away earlier this year, and I cried because he was such a great human and welcomed me with open arms to understand the hospitality space and understand what it took to be in operations and what it took to run fast casual. And I mean, there was so many exciting things that we were reconnecting on a deeper level at that time. And I will remember vividly, I was in New York finishing up a business meeting. I was like, I got to call Junior because there's something that I want to just run by him. And I forgot 2 or 3 days. And the day I went to call him, the next day that news came out. So
I talked to him the day that he died, man. I talked to him a few hours before he did. We called. I was on a cell phone with him. I'll never forget it, man. And you say that because we had put out an article on him on Forbes, and we were going to put him on the actual magazine cover. And me and him was talking that morning, and we had agreed to come back out and take a photo shoot in his office in Kentucky. And it was a proud moment. And to get that news a few hours later that he died, man, that was a very devastating day. And it felt weird knowing that I had only spoken to him a few hours ago. And you hear he had a heart attack. It's like, okay, he'll bounce back from that in a few days. It's Junior Bridgman. Yeah. And, to hear it afterwards. But to be able to spend the time that I did with him. And honestly, I did exactly what he said no to the story at first. And I saw him at a Sixers game, and I did exactly what I was just telling you CEOs that I went up to him and I said, Mr. Bridgman, my name is Jabari Young, such and such. He grabbed me by the arm and brought me in and hugged me before he said yes. And then only a few months later, I said, man, I know what that was about. You did this very thing to CEOs. And he was like, yes. And that's again, it's just about making that first step. The first step is that, you just got to do it. And again, y'all have a cheat code. Y'all are athletes. Y'all can do it. But I just don't think enough people, use that cheat code. But if they did, you'll see success stories that emulate Junior Bridgman. I think you may have a whole bunch of possible billionaires coming along from that.
Yeah. And I'll just say this last thing to everybody out there, and especially young athletes and young professionals. I know it is daunting and it seems scary to go and reach out, but you will be well surprised on the response that you get and how positive it is if you just step out on that limb and are a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah. Sort of like how I stepped out on a limb to ask you to come to the show and you didn't answer, but I guess. But
you see how it came back full circle though.
It's what I'm saying. It's a win-win, right? You stepped out on a limb. I stepped out on a limb and look what happens, right? It's a win-win. Perfect combination.
No doubt. Well, I love this, man. I appreciate your time, Jabari. This is amazing. I look forward to our next conversation, and let's catch up again here soon.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, my brother.
It's time for the Confidently Curious Question, where we ask questions that are one step ahead, sponsored by T. Rowe Price, where they believe that asking better questions can lead to better outcomes. So my Confidently Curious Question of the day is, which of these dates is known as Tax Day in the United States? AKA Uncle Sam. A, October 31st, B, April 15th, or C, January 1st. The answer is B. April 15th is the day that all federal income tax returns must be submitted to the federal government, or the date you need to file an extension. For me personally, I always file an extension. I got K-1s and I just need a little extra time to get my business in order. That's our Confidently Curious Question for the week. Thanks to our sponsor, T. Rowe Price, for modeling the power of better questions in their approach of making better investment decisions. T. Rowe Price proudly sponsors No Free Lunch. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the podcast participants and do not necessarily reflect those of T. Rowe Price. Their sponsorship supports the platform and does not imply endorsement of specific content or perspectives. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe to No Free Lunch on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.